with more on Google right now and what seems to be reorganization and a question of focus. Pete Peschel is right beside me here. He is the tech editor at Mashable. So, Pete, you were reading this report right along with me here. So it essentially seems like Google now is synonymous with the internet products.
Right.
It will have its own business head. And the big thing that we used to understand as Google is going to be called Alphabet.
Right, and I'm kind of interested in this as kind of a branding exercise, I think, because it's like the Google brand, I think in some of their crazier ventures, has not always served the company that well. You think about Google Glass or Google Wing, whatever it may be. Sometimes it sort of gives the impression to some people of like a bunch of engineers who kind of don't know what they're doing or don't know anything about business, kind of just trying crazy things. And I think that has served to undermine them at times in the past. And this sort of fixes that.
For public investors, it's true. It does seem to, well, how can they be working on that and also taking my search seriously? So this does seem to clean up, and I'm also assuming internally some reporting lines as well. One thing that I noticed too about them saying, and I referenced this statement, we still want to do things other people think are crazy, but we are excited about. They also explain why they chose the name Alphabet. Because alpha obviously means an investment return that beats a benchmark. So they're trying to say, we're here for you as a serious blue chip tech company. We're still going to have our engineers and keep them happy, let them work on their side projects. But you as an investor will understand very clearly where the lines are.
Yeah, and I think this also speaks a lot to Sergey Brin's and Larry Page's interest and where their passions are. Because they've basically, they've appointed Sundar Pichai to sort of take Google. You're doing a great job, Sundar, and he is doing a great job for a lot of things. I mean, he's not as charismatic a CEO as you might want, but he's a very smart guy. And that's running along, and they're doing more or less incremental updates onto a lot of products. Whereas Sergey and Larry are very interested in these 10x, Google X moonshot type projects, and that's where their energy will be driven.
Because that, to your point, is part of their release as well, which says, we're hoping to make Google even better through greater focus. We want to empower great entrepreneurs and companies to publish, and as a result of all this, hopefully improving the lives of as many people as possible, which gets to what people used to call these quote-unquote pet projects.
Yeah, I think we're going to see sort of a renewed focus on a lot of those. You're probably going to see more emergent personalities on each of these, which have kind of been taking a back seat here and there, albeit, occasionally someone from, say, Project Wing will come out publicly. But it's very like you're going to see each one of these probably with more of a coherent plan going forward. And even as crazy as the ideas are, and they will continue to be crazy, I'm sure.
So, Pete, while I have you here, I know I asked you to come in and talk about Samsung and this big product unveil on Thursday. We've been talking about Apple and the idea that it seems as if Apple's streaming service, Apple TV, is coming. No one can quite call exactly when, but it seems unfair to speak so much about Apple without talking about Samsung. So we know we have this big event coming up. What do you make of these new phones that are meant to essentially challenge the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus?
Yeah, they've leaked out a lot in advance, and that speaks to a little bit how Samsung's security isn't quite as airtight as Apple's. But those two phones,
although maybe they want it that way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but there's going to be, Samsung has always sort of owned the big size phone category up until the 6 Plus came out last year. Samsung still makes great big phones, but the existence of a new phone with these curved edges, which is basically the successor to the S6 Edge. Now it's the S6 Edge Plus, they keep adding sort of suffixes to these phones, shows sort of a very, Samsung has this design win that they believe in, which is this, the curved edges people like and provide a little bit of extra functionality, and they seem to be selling well. So, I mean, if they're going to challenge the iPhone 6 Plus, it's going to be with this.
All right, so it sounds like you think there actually is a spot to challenge Apple's dominance in these handsets. What about price? Because Samsung usually is more competitive.
Well, Samsung does better than any other Android manufacturer, but that's not really saying much. And they should have done better with the S6, albeit they didn't get their mix right. See, the S6 and the S6 Edge came out at the same time, and the S6 Edge supply was limited. So when you saw those two phones together, more people opted for the Edge, but there just wasn't enough in the supply chain. So that's why it seems like the S6 is doing so bad.
Yeah, that was a big just rotten spot for them. They wanted to compete, and then they didn't have enough products. That's pretty much the worst
And
case scenario.
although the S6 is still a great phone, it's just they just didn't have the mix right. It's sort of similar to what happened with Apple in the iPhone 5S and 5C a couple years back. The 5C was kind of looked at as a failure, but now I kind of see it everywhere because they finally got the mix right and got enough into the marketplace.
Pete, thank you very much. Pete Paschal joining me
pleasure.
there.